Kia ora te whānau. Today we're considering the Gospel text for Sunday the 17th of November 2024. It's Mark chapter 13 verses 1 through to 8. As he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to Jesus, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings!" Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another, all will be thrown down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" Then Jesus began to say to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and saying, 'I'm he,' and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumours of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of birth pangs." This message is being prepared less than 2 weeks before the closing of the American elections, when presumably there will be a new president. We'll see where the chips fall in terms of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And this message will be published after the results are known. If you're watching this, you already, if you've been paying attention, know the outcome of that election. I don't, not yet. I very rarely talk about politics in my homilies and sermons, either online or in person, though if you listen carefully you could probably picture which way I'm likely to lean. The reason I'm doing it today is because of the lectionary gospel reading. It'll become clear. Not knowing the outcome of the election, though you do, adds a bit of tension to me for what I have to say. So let's start at this place. We currently live in the West anyway, under the cover of Pax Americana, the American peace. We've done this since the end of the Second World War in 1945. We've enjoyed this for nearly 70 years. Now 70 years sounds like a long time, but in the great sweep of history, it's just like that. It seems like a long time because 70 years and 10, which is what I'm quickly coming up to, is the basic lifespan that we expect. So where it's been there for all of our lives, it seems like it's something that has always been. And it has been a period for those of us in the West of unprecedented peace, of stability and prosperity. That is, as I said, if one lives in the Western world. The joys, the blessings of Pax Americana. But it's sustained because America has 128 bases, military bases, in 55 countries around the world. It's part of what keeps it steady. Along with the most powerful navy in the world. It's not the largest, but it's certainly the most powerful. It has 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers and a whole lot of smaller non-nuclear powered ones. It has 71 nuclear-powered submarines that can stay underwater for months at a time. And it also has the most advanced air force in the world. It spends a large part of its budget on its defence. I think it spends as much as the next 26 nations all put together. many of whom are actually, I read that somewhere, allies. It spends a huge amount of money on its military. Yet we could be facing, I want to suggest, the end of American empire. I think the signs have been there for a while, because we're seeing nativistic and nationalistic and xenophobic forces very powerfully at work in that nation. It's seriously divided and becoming more so, even though they share more in terms of their values than that which divides them. They already agree on far more things than things they disagree about, and yet the divisions are becoming pronounced and moving into places of abiding hatred. This election, for which you know the outcome and I don't, could determine the future of our planet, or at least accelerate it in a certain direction, which I suggest is probably inevitable. Here's what I think. Okay, so I'm sorry, you're going to, this is now a time to click off if you don't want to hear it, but here's what I think. Of course, you already know the outcome of the election, and so we'll be able to discern what kind of future we're actually facing. Why should I be concerned, you might ask? Well, there's an old saying that originated about France, but it's been inherited, that says if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And I think it's true, that what happens in the United States has a profound effect on the rest of the world. We're all implicated. I personally think we should all get a vote, but that isn't going to happen. So let's put a couple of scenarios before you. If Kamala Harris and the Democrats win the presidency, I suspect not much is going to happen, except that the bitterness and the rancor will continue and may be ratcheted up a bit. She probably won't be able to do much. It'll be pretty much business as usual. This will be especially the case if the Democrats lose the Senate, though I imagine that'll mean there's going to be inquiry after investigation after investigation, which looks most likely. And yet they, Democrats, will likely also regain the House of Representatives. This also looks the most likely. These are the peculiarities of the American system. The Senate, just in case you don't know, has 100 senators, 2 for each state. But this works very much to the advantage of the Republican Party, because the Republicans dominate the sparsely populated rural areas, whereas the Democrats dominate the population-dense urban areas. So, giving the vagaries of things like Wyoming, which has 2 Republican senators representing only less than 700,000 people, while California also, but it has 2 Democrat senators, the same value in terms of voting capacity in the Senate, but yet representing 35 million people. Go figure. This is the system that they have. But I want to suggest if Donald Trump regains the White House, there are a number of things that are likely. Not certain, but I want to suggest that are likely. The first is that he will almost certainly avoid jail, because he'll simply make the cases go away. He'll instruct his Attorney General to basically cancel the court cases that are outstanding against him. The second thing is that, and this is a more serious one, is that America will likely stop being the international policeman. We're all on our own and potentially quite vulnerable if that's the case. Good luck, Ukraine. The third thing, and there'll be many who will disagree about this, but I think all the pointers are there, particularly when you see so many conservative Republicans warning about the dangers of Donald Trump, people like Liz and Dick Cheney, and you couldn't get more Republican than them, or more conservative really, saying that this man is dangerous, he's a fascist. And the reality is that America could well become a fascist state run for the benefit of one man. The fourth thing is that President Trump will actively go after those he considers his political enemies and those he considers have been insufficiently loyal to him. And this time he'll make sure that he actually gets the ones he wants. And the fifth thing is look out the rest of the world. My worry would be that he will likely just take what he wants because he can. This is how he has always been. Now, if Donald Trump has lost the election, and you'll know and I don't, we'll never know if any of what I have just suggested would come true. If he has won, just bear it in mind as you watch the days and the next 4 years unfold. I imagine either way that it's going to be pretty ugly. Because, as I said, of its growing internal division, and barring a huge crisis that provokes a significant reset, I imagine that Pax Americana is going to wane. Either way, just more slowly if Harris is the president. Now, let's get to the text. The context, the political context of Israel in this time where Jesus and his disciples are in Holy Week is Pax Romana. Not Pax Americana, but Pax Romana. This existed from somewhere like 27 BCE, before the Common Era, to 180 CE, Common Era, or AD. It went for just over 200 years. And so we're now looking at a time around 2930 AD. It's well in there. And we often imagine, because of the way that we read the Gospels, the Romans to be the enemy. And indeed, for a theocratic nation like Israel, they were desperately hated. Yet, I want to suggest the possibility that they provided a measure of security, provided, of course, conditional, of course, upon the Jewish people being willing to pay their taxes and to play nicely, which they eventually stopped doing, resulting in the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70. I'm wanting to suggest that looking and affirming the strength and the beauty of the temple feeds into basically 5 illusions. And they're not too different from us today, 70 years into Pax Americana. The first is the illusion of permanence. You're looking at these buildings. They've been there 46 years, this temple has been in the building, and we get the sense that it's still ongoing. There's still stuff that's being done. So it gives this sense of permanence. Nothing's happened. It's been here for all these years and it's continued to be growing. It then gives the illusion of success, of God's blessing. Well, of course, God must be blessing it, otherwise he wouldn't allow this thing to be carrying on the way that it is. It's an illusion of success. It's the illusion of blessing. There's also the illusion of progress. Because, as I said, imagine that there's still work being done and things at some level seem to be getting better. And there's also the illusion of obligation. That because we're doing these wonderful things for God, we're building this house for him. It's been going for 46 years and we're still working on it. It's extraordinary. God is obligated to look after us, is obligated to be our God, is obligated to protect us. What we discover is that nothing lasts. And when we look at it, we see that as he's talking about the temple, Jesus is also aware of the precariousness of his own situation. He's in his last week and he's facing death. Even though no one would expect, except a very few, were aware that the die had already been cast. The plan had already been laid, and that this can only end in one way. And it's a backdrop to the conversation that Jesus and his disciples are having. There's a kind of parallelism where his life is tracking the life of the nation. Everything looks to be fine and secure, and it isn't. Nothing is permanent. So often at its peak, we see from that elevated point the promise of destruction and demise. And that's where I think we are today. It's like we're at the top of the bell curve and we can see what's on the other side. And so we have Jesus saying there'll be those coming and saying, I'm he. And I want to suggest they're not claiming to be Jesus, but they're claiming to be able to provide the goodies that we want. I'm the only one who can save you. Does that ring any bells for anybody? Because it should. And here's the thing. We tap into that because we all want to avoid the possibility of suffering, of loss in some way. And yet in this passage there's an invitation to embrace whatever comes, including the possibility of suffering. There are no guarantees, and it doesn't mean that we'll all suffer. Maybe some of us will, maybe most of us won't. But ultimately, we're called to be true to the God who has called us and to whom he has called each of us to be. The God in whose hands our lives are securely held. Our ultimate destiny is not in the hands of the political structures that surround us, that we can get so uptight and rail against so angrily. But our lives, our ultimate destiny is in the hands of the God who loves us, the one in whom we trust, the one who ultimately wills the very best for each of us. Now this was true of the followers of Jesus in the first century, and it's true of us today. Amen. God bless you.